The new Premier League season has the potential to be the craziest season ever. I expect the top 4 fight to be even more competitive this year. We'll be watching the league's most successful team fight in court with the league itself on 115 counts of financial cheating. This may also be Pep's last year as City manager, ending the most dominant stretch in the Premier League era. Liverpool's post-Klopp era begins as Arne Slot will attempt to not fall in the shadow of one of the most inspiring and charismatic managers alive. Manchester United stuck with Ten Hag even after their worst Premier League finish ever last year, and have continued to back him big in the transfer market. Arsenal reinforced what was already the best defense in the league, adding Millennial Maldini as they try to beat City to first place. Chelsea are already facing controversy as their new possession-based manager has taken one of the best overlapping fullbacks in the world when fit and asked him to invert into midfield during preseason. Spurs are entering year 2 under their inspiring manager, but after their tailspin during the second half of last season, they will need to course correct fast. Aston Villa, after finally qualifying for the Champions League, have spent like crazy this summer as they hope to challenge for top 4 again. Ipswich Town, a club punching way above their weight, have a chance to make themselves a hard opponent to beat, making even the bottom end of the table a pain for big clubs. PSR, all of the teams battling profit and sustainability rules, and not to mention even more VAR drama that will surely be coming our way as semi-automated offside isn't being introduced until after the season has already started. All of that and more will be covered in this video, as I preview the wild Premier League season about to come our way. We'll start with Man City. After over a year since the league charged them with breaking their financial rules 115 times, the two of them will finally battle it out in court this fall. The ramifications of this are massive, not just for City, but for the league too. Imagine the league fails to uphold their own rules, and they lose in court. Which team would respect them after that? None of them, especially the smaller clubs who have already gotten point deductions for smaller offenses. And this is a real possibility as City can afford the best lawyers in the world. I honestly think they have more financial might than the league does. The Premier League's reputation is on the line, and not just their reputation, but their autonomy is too. After the Super League debacle, the British government proposed a bill to regulate the league to stop them and the clubs involved from ever going rogue again. If the league can't successfully police the rules they've made, the government will have more leverage than ever to intervene and regulate the league. Like all private companies, the prospect of this happening must make the Premier League sick. They will be desperate to keep their autonomy. As for what can be lost for City, we really don't know how severe their punishment can be, as there is no precedent for this. The league has never charged the club to this degree of rule breaking. If the Premier League wins in court, they could punish City however they seem fit, as they will want to set the precedent to stop all other clubs from ever even thinking about bending financial rules in the ways City have done the past 10 years. As for Pep, you can imagine he's looking at all of this thinking that a lot can change one way or another after this season. He's won everything there is to win. What's left for him to do at City? His core is aging, as is he. It makes sense to me why he wouldn't renew his contract. He deserves a break and then maybe eventually coach the national team. That would be fun. From one legendary manager leaving to another, Klopp has officially left Liverpool, and the start of a new era is set to begin. Will this go the way of post-Fergie at United or post-Wenger at Arsenal, where the shoes are just too big to fill and the comparisons are too heavy to ever progress? Or will Arne Slot defy the odds? There are some familiar faces though to make this transition more assured for Liverpool fans. For example, Michael Edwards is back, Klopp's right-hand man, famous for securing the signings of Salah, Robertson, Alisson, and Van Dijk. Liverpool won 7 major titles with him as director of football. Now he's been brought back as CEO of football. Having that continuity is great and should help transition the club into their new era. From what I hear about Arne Slot, he has a great way with players and is very tactically sharp, but here's what's key for this managerial change. Arne Slot has inherited a squad that is already good and, more importantly, well balanced. He won't have to worry about having a bloated squad with a lot of inexperienced players like Enzo Maresca does. We'll get to him later. It's pretty plug and play for Slot. He will require a lot more from his defensive midfielders than Klopp ever did. Since recording this, they've been linked with Martin Zubamendi, and that makes a lot of sense. Anyways, back to the video. But he does have a healthy amount of options to try to make it work off the jump. Klopp said himself that he's leaving the squad and the club in a good place, and he seemed to rightfully take pride in that. Liverpool are in a much healthier place than Arsenal and United were when they both lost their legendary managers. Change can be exciting, Liverpool fans. Klopp's race was run. Now you get to watch a different type of football for the first time in 9 years. Enjoy it and build on from there. But quickly, if you're enjoying this video, a like and subscribe could collectively change my life. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Now to their rivals, Manchester United, the club that did what no one expected, defying all odds and expectations, bringing back Ten Hag. After an extensive internal review and even testing the market for managers that may be interested, they ultimately decided to keep him. Last year was United's worst league finish in their Premier League history, and their midfield pretty much controlled 0 matches last year, as they allowed the most shots against during the second half of the season in the entire league. Yes, more than the 3 relegated clubs. That's a sign of tactical confusion and just general disarray, and yet he stays. There must be something to Ten Hag. You don't keep a manager around after those results and an extensive review review for no reason. I think the club knows more than we do on this one, and they probably think the blame should be shared. And to his credit, he also proved multiple times that he is capable of winning even amongst the craziness. Is this a year Ten Hag makes the jump to a more possession-based setup? He signed a keeper that suggested he wanted to do that last year, but their pressing looked completely off at the start of last season, and they never fully committed again. I think that's part of why Rashford had a poor year by his standards last year. He's a beast in transition, and United didn't focus on transition moments last year. It was a confusing mix of trying to press, but not really. Ten Hag will need to pick one or the other from the start of this season and commit in order to hit the ground running. Euro is an exciting signing, but I worry he's not ready, and that there will be already too much pressure put onto him. He's 18 and he's come from Ligue 1. He will need time to adjust without a doubt. There are no guarantees on how United will perform this coming season, but what's certain is that this is their first year under new operators at the club, and they're going to really want to make a good first impression. Now let's talk about Arsenal, coming off of another second place finish. Except last year they didn't finish with a whimper and instead peaked in the second half, losing only once since January to Aston Villa. They were on fire and were amazing to watch. Arsenal had the best defense in the league last year by far, and they still chose to reinforce with Calafiori. He'll likely play at left back, but he's versatile, which we all know is key for Arteta. He can be top quality cover for Saliba or Gabriel if needed. Those two can't play pretty much every minute again. They need proper rest and protection. They're also close to adding 28-year-old Mikel Merino at the time of recording, after losing their beloved academy graduate Emil Smith-Rowe. End of an era, I know. He just never hit the same heights we saw pre-groin injury. But the signings of Calafiori and Merino means exciting things for Arsenal's left-hand side. Those two could potentially unlock Martinelli again, whom after losing Xhaka from his side, had a down year last year. It also looks like Arsenal won't sign a game-breaking attacker this summer at the time of recording. For large periods of last year, it looked like it was what Arsenal were missing most. But which game-changing attacker was even available this window? Besides Mbappe, no one, really. So it makes sense for them to wait if they choose to, and hope Saka and Martinelli can continue to develop to win matches on their own in the ways Mane and Salah did for Liverpool. That's the last step in their development. But regardless, Arsenal may have just enough to win the league this year. Now for Chelsea, their first season under Enzo Maresca. Chelsea are now all aboard the possession-based football train, hiring a young, respected manager who once worked under Pep and shares a lot of similar values to him. The issue is, as always with Chelsea managers, he'll likely have a small window to make big impressions. There were reports around the time he got hired that Chelsea have looked at Arsenal's model of patience and long-term growth with hopes of replicating that. But to me, that feels unlikely, doesn't it? Chelsea sacked managers. Even recently, right when it looked like they found their legs under Poch at the end of last season, they fired him too. We've seen some growing pains in preseason with their huge loss to Celtic, and apprehension from a lot of Chelsea fans having to see Reece James invert into midfield now. It's difficult to see one of the best overlapping fullbacks in the world having to play in the middle now, but like we saw with Trent last year, it has a chance to really work. He just needs to stay healthy to have a fighting chance. I'm looking forward to seeing Chelsea play a new style of football, and if Maresca can get more out of Enzo and Caicedo when they're on the pitch together, something Poch struggled with. But like I said, everyone involved must hope they hit the ground running, or things will sour quickly like with every other Chelsea manager in recent history. Moving on to Spurs. No one started the 2023-24 Premier League season hotter than Spurs, but after that it was a mixed bag. Who could forget Ange's high line revolution? Down 2 men versus Chelsea, and still playing a crazy high line, which of course led to a defeat and this soundbite from Ange. I will get to the positives, because there are a lot of them, but this felt naive. There's nothing galvanizing about having everyone play that high up when you're down 2 players, but it did at least set the tone for what he wanted to accomplish at Spurs. He wanted to bring exciting attacking football back to Tottenham, as well as build for the long term. He rightly said multiple times last year that top 4 wasn't the be-all and end-all. Exciting football and long-term projects are 2 things Spurs haven't done in ages. Ange has done well in recruitment too. I love Mickey van de Ven in particular. I think he's a real deal and has all the physical attributes to develop into a real star. He is crucial to Spurs' high line because his pace for a defender is outer-worldly. He can catch up to a majority of attacking players in transition. He will need to stay fit for longer this season though.
And speaking of good recruitment, very expensive, but very, very good signing.
What's also crucial for Spurs is that they'll need to be more disciplined this year. After the attacking foundation they successfully set last year, it's important they find better balance, even if Ange remains adamant that they have to always play a high line. I anticipate it will be another year of development, as finding that balance is very difficult and requires time. You know who's had an impressive summer? Aston Villa. We'll see how the signings manage, but there's no denying they've shown ambition. It looks to me like the club are doing everything in their power to not only put up a fight in the Champions League, but stay there too. They'll hope to do the opposite of what Newcastle have went through. Making the Champions League felt to be too much too soon for them. With the exception of Ross Barkley, every other signing is 23 years or younger too. Their board have shown faith in Emery and seem to want to build for the long term with him. Jadon Philogene reunited with Villa this summer as he looks to make the jump to the Premier League. He's been immense in the Championship. HITC Sevens watchers have been known this, but without a doubt he isn't the finished product and will need to continue to develop to make an impact at this level. Someone who will make an immediate impact is Onana. Yes, he doesn't have Champions League experience, but he has plenty of high pressure experience with Belgium as he recently started in the round of 16s this past Euros versus France. He will bring a commanding presence to their midfield that I think has been greatly missed by them. He immediately becomes their best player in a duel. I do think Douglas Luiz is very good and underrated, so I think he will be missed. Filling the void he's left is a big question mark for Villa going into this season, but there is no doubting their ambition to make sure they stay in the top 4 this season. Now for a club that will likely finish at the other end of the table, Ipswich Town. They're very fascinating. Like Luton last year on paper, they seem to have no business being in the Premier League. The reason why they are because they built around a fantastic manager, Kieran McKenna. He's been so influential that the club have listened to his suggestions off the pitch too, as he was part of the reason why the club was convinced to install a new state-of-the-art pitch at their stadium. Ipswich mostly play fast and direct football, which is the opposite of another recently brilliant team that came up from the Championship, Company's Burnley. That Burnley team liked to hold possession and pass around teams, but they just could not translate that to the Premier League at all. It was too big of a jump for them to successfully do that versus that level of opposition. Ipswich should on paper fare better in the top division, as smaller clubs have a better chance to hurt teams in transition as opposed to trying to pass around billion-pound squads. I think there's a real possibility Ipswich will be a hard away day for every club in England next year, adding yet another entertaining fixture to the neutrals list. Now, as I've already highlighted in my video titled "The Premier League is a Mess," which I go more in depth in that video than I will here, all of the super rich clubs are fighting to find ways to spend more money, but the league's profit and sustainability rules are making that awfully difficult for them to do so. The financial year closed on July 1st for Premier League clubs. We're probably only a matter of weeks away before we start to find out which clubs failed to sell enough hotels they already owned back to themselves in order to balance the books. So we're probably pretty close to finding out about more mid-season point deductions.
Literally less than a week after I wrote that line.
Docking clubs points mid-season for losing more money than they're allowed to in a 3-year rolling period throws a huge wrench into the season. Everton were surely unhappy to be sucked into a very serious relegation battle mid-season. This may become the norm going forward as the league finally started to enforce this rule last season, after clubs got a grace period for a couple of years due to matches with no crowds significantly impacting revenue. Now, I'm sorry to remind you that VAR was a mess last season too. We'll surely see more of that next year as PGMOL haven't announced any significant changes to their process as of recording this video. And to make matters worse, semi-automated offside is being introduced after the season has already begun. Such a massive change should not be introduced after the season has already begun. It brings an imbalance to the competition. Imagine a club is hard done by the manual line drawing trash we saw last year, but their rivals only played small clubs during that time, easily won, and had no issues with VAR. It's just unfair, and these things are going to come up without a doubt. Significant improvements are needed from the refs. We saw the tension between clubs and refs boil over last year as they reached their limits of what they tolerate or what they deem acceptable from the richest football league in the world. So to summarize, they've promised no significant changes to their process, an important change is being made after the season has already started, and tension between refs and managers is already past the boiling point. This should be fun. But with all that being said, the good, the bad, I'm still so ready for club football to be back. I'll be around all season to make hopefully more entertaining videos such as this one. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. It genuinely helps me out a lot. Take care.